Sometime in the fading hush of a Texas evening, Dakota Rivers struck the earth with her shovel and felt the ground answer back with a sharp, metallic clang that didn't belong in dirt. She froze, breath caught between ribs as the soil shifted to reveal a corner of green steel buried beneath the barn floor. Not rusted equipment, not a forgotten toolbox. A full bank safe, oiled, polished, and unmistakably moved here recently. 3 days earlier, she'd buried her father and been told he left her nothing but debt and a ranch supposedly collapsing under its own weight. Yet here, beneath loose boards and freshly disturbed earth, waited a secret he had hidden with the urgency of a man chased by time. As she brushed away dirt, her fingers traced 3 Roman numerals, scratched recently beside the dials. IVX, a clue only she should understand. Before she could test a combination, footsteps crunched outside the barn, slow, confident, belonging to someone who had no fear of being caught here. Sage Whitmore stepped through the doorway, weathered face shadowed with something between grief and warning. His gaze fell on the exposed safe. "He finally buried it," Sage murmured, stepping closer. "Moved it out here when things got bad." Dakota's pulse quickened as Sage revealed he'd been her father's silent business partner. The secret safe wasn't filled with junk. It held the evidence of a hidden mining operation tied to generations of family legacy. And with engines rumbling up the driveway, Dakota realized she had opened far more than a buried box. She had opened a storm. Sage's words poured out in a low, gravel-rough voice as he revealed what her father had kept from her for years. The silver mining operation hadn't been a reckless gamble. It was built on her great-grandfather's forgotten claims from the 1950s, rediscovered in old attic boxes. Her father and Sage had quietly extracted silver, selling small amounts scattered across multiple dealers to avoid attention. The money had rebuilt the ranch, bought new land, and repaired everything Dakota believed was falling apart. But the pattern hadn't stayed hidden. Federal agents had begun interviewing silver buyers, tracking unexplained deposits, and piecing together the quiet fortune flowing into the river's property. That looming presence, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, was already on its way to seize anything that looked like unreported income. And if they reached the safe before she unlocked it, everything, land, rights, inheritance, would be frozen in an instant. As engines rolled up the driveway, their sound official and heavy, Dakota's hand trembled over the dials. IVX, the childhood memory struck like lightning, her father calling her his number one, her 5-candle birthday, the 10 silver dollars he once wished he could give her. She spun the dials, 1, 5, 10. The locks clicked open with perfect precision. Inside lay documents, cash bundles, raw silver, and a thick leather portfolio holding mining permits and geological surveys. But the pounding boots at the door meant time had run out. Federal voices shouted orders. Sage grabbed a handful of silver. Dakota grabbed the documents that could prove everything. And together they slipped through the hidden exit as flashlights blasted through the barn behind them. They ran through darkness toward Sage's truck hidden behind old machinery, climbing in just as agents stormed the barn. Sage rolled downhill without headlights, coasting into the night as Dakota clutched the leather portfolio to her chest. Every page inside felt like a heartbeat, proof of generations who had held, worked, and protected this land. But her phone buzzed with a message that coiled fear tight around her ribs. "We have your ranch surrounded. Return the mining records and avoid felony charges." They reached Sage's property miles away, slipping into a concealed basement room reinforced like a vault. Under sterile light, Dakota spread out her great-grandfather's documents, hand-drawn vein maps, assay results, legal opinions, notarized letters proving continuous ownership. Everything pointed to one truth: the mining operation wasn't criminal, it was inherited, and the trust protecting it was legally binding. As they pieced through the files, Dakota's phone rang. Agent Sarah Mitchell. Her voice carried authority sharpened by assumption. She accused Dakota of running an unregistered mining operation, laundering income, falsifying land purchases. Dakota steadied her voice and cited the law, Texas, recognition of unregistered family claims when continuous ownership was maintained. Silence stretched on the line as the agent realized the documents might undermine her entire case. Sage leaned in, reminding Dakota that someone powerful had pushed this investigation forward. Whoever wanted the mineral rights wasn't stopping at silver. They wanted the land beneath everything. As Dakota looked at the documents spread like a map of buried generations, she understood the danger. This wasn't just about mining, it was about control. Hours before sunrise, Dakota uncovered something deeper than any silver vein. Her great-grandfather's trust didn't just include mining rights. It included subsurface extraction privileges across multiple counties. Oil, gas, rare earth minerals, rights worth tens of millions. Sage stared at the documents as if they were dynamite. Every major development planned for the next 5 years. The shopping center, the industrial park, the hospital expansion, sat directly above land the river's trust controlled beneath the soil. And suddenly the federal investigation made horrifying sense. Someone wasn't after taxes. Someone wanted her rights erased before construction began. A corporation named Meridian Development had filed a lawsuit targeting old trusts, aiming to invalidate them through environmental technicalities. They had also hired private investigators with ties to former federal agents, men who specialized in prompting financial investigations that coincidentally targeted whoever stood in the way of big development money. Dakota's chest tightened as she realized her father had been fighting more than fear. He had been protecting a legacy worth a fortune. Outside Sage's basement window, headlights appeared. A black sedan with government plates idled silently, watching, waiting. Making sure she didn't disappear before morning, Dakota exhaled slowly. They were afraid of what she could prove, and they wanted her cornered. But looking at the documents glowing beneath the basement light, she felt a shift inside. Her father had spent years preparing for this moment. Now she had to decide if she would run from the storm or walk straight into it. Just as the sun began bleeding into the horizon, mining rights attorney Marcus Webb delivered a revelation that cracked the entire conspiracy open. Meridian Development's lawsuit wasn't random. It strategically targeted old trusts like hers in hopes of invalidating mineral rights across the county. The company had hired former federal agents to search for any hint of wrongdoing that could trigger a financial investigation and freeze assets long enough for them to seize subsurface control. Her father's quiet silver sales had given them the excuse they needed. But Webb had discovered something Meridian hadn't expected. Her father had contacted federal authorities 2 years earlier, requesting clarification on trust reporting laws. The written response clearly exempted their operation as long as yearly totals stayed below $500,000. He had followed the law. When Meridian's vice president called offering $500,000 for rights worth $50 million, Dakota felt steel form in her spine. When they raised it to $2 million, she still said no. At the courthouse, Agent Mitchell reviewed the trust documents and realized the federal case was collapsing. Taxes needed adjusting. Penalties needed paying. But Dakota's mining rights were legitimate. The investigation dissolved before her eyes. Outside the courthouse, her phone buzzed with a final text from Meridian. "This isn't over." Dakota looked at the rising sun reflecting off courthouse windows. They had underestimated her father. They had underestimated the trust. And now they were underestimating her. The land beneath her feet was worth more than she'd ever imagined, and she wasn't about to let anyone steal it. 2 weeks later, the barn that once held a buried safe became the center of a bidding war. Mining executives, geologists, and attorneys crowded the old wooden floor as survey teams descended into a freshly stabilized shaft. Sage climbed out covered in dust, eyes blazing. The main silver vein stretched far deeper and across more acreage than the early documents had ever suggested. Companies offered multi-million-dollar extraction leases with guaranteed annual royalties. Even conservative projections suggested a steady income of $5 million a year for decades. Meanwhile, Meridian Development's empire began to crack. Their lawsuit was quietly withdrawn after internal communications leaked, exposing their attempts to weaponize federal investigators. The county opened inquiries into their construction permits. Their grip on regional development slipped with every document Dakota now controlled. When James Morrison called again, his tone was stripped of arrogance. He asked for terms. Dakota named $25 million per parcel. His voice tightened, admitting their budget couldn't handle it. "Then relocate," she replied simply. After she ended the call, Webb laid out contracts worth more money than her younger self would have believed possible. Sage placed a hand on her shoulder, reminding her that her father had built all of this with determination, secrecy, and love. As Dakota looked out across the fields, sun catching on the old fence posts and the barn that now stood like a gateway to the future, she felt every generation behind her standing tall. They dug silver from the earth, hidden secrets under floorboards, and fought for a legacy no corporation could bury. And now it was hers to protect. Standing in the doorway of the barn, Dakota let the wind sweep through her hair as she absorbed the transformation of her life. Weeks ago, she had arrived believing the ranch was worthless. Now banks wanted to open private wealth accounts in her name. Mining firms scheduled meetings for long-term extraction planning. Investors sent proposals. But beneath all the sudden noise and opportunity, she felt a steady calm. The understanding that her father had spent years preparing for this. Every quiet improvement to the ranch, every repaired beam, every new tool had been part of a plan he'd never lived long enough to explain. He had known danger was coming. He had known powerful hands were reaching for their rights. And when he buried the safe beneath the barn, he buried it for her, trusting she would be smart enough, brave enough, and stubborn enough to open it. She walked across the property, tracing her fingers along the old fence line. This land held stories, sweat, hope, secrets. And now a future bright enough to last generations. The silver was real. The rights were real. The danger had been real, but she had survived it. As evening settled over the ranch, Dakota breathed in deeply. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something warm settle into her bones, belonging. This wasn't just her inheritance, it was her destiny. Later that night, Dakota stepped into the barn one final time. The safe was gone. The evidence was locked securely in Sage's reinforced basement, and in her hand lay the old foreclosure notice the lawyer once presented with pity. She tore it in half, letting the pieces drift to the dirt like dust falling off an old life. The ranch wasn't dead. It wasn't drowning in debt. It was a kingdom built by generations who had dug deep, worked hard, and protected their legacy with everything they had. She imagined her father standing beside her, hands in his pockets, giving that small nod he used to give whenever he was proud. "I'll take it from here," she whispered into the quiet. Outside, stars shimmered over fields that now held the promise of wealth, renewal, and future security. The dangers were gone. The lies had fallen apart, and the legacy remained, stronger than steel, deeper than silver, and rooted in the bloodline that led straight to her. She walked out of the barn knowing she was not just saving the ranch. She was expanding it into an empire. If this journey pulled you in, if you felt the chase, the danger, the legacy rising, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe for more stories just like this. Your support keeps these narratives alive and helps bring more powerful storytelling your way. Before you go, where are you listening from, and what time is it where you are right now?